are going to be watching what food was served at Wild West Saloons. To be honest with you, you guys already know this, but I grew up in Texas, so I only know good food in the Alamo, so let's check it out.
Old West Saloon, and whenever you see an Old West Saloon in a TV show or a movie, they're always drinking.
Me too.
They're never eating. But people did eat at Old West Saloons. Not only did they eat, but often the lunch was free.
How? Wait, that sounds awesome. You think they're handing out like Buc-ee's, I don't know, pulled pork sandwiches? That would be freaking great.
And that free lunch could be anything from a sandwich to oysters to a big bowl of the classic cowboy dish, pork and beans.
Oh, pork and beans is so good. Oh, look at that. And then also, I hope the oysters are regular oysters and not, what are they called? The Rocky Mountain oysters? They probably were of the mountain variety.
So thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video as we see what it was like to eat in an Old West Saloon. This
Yummy.
time on Tasting History.
Oh, that was so cute.
Today I am in the old mining town, the old ghost town of Cerro Gordo, which is in California, right off of Death Valley. Back in the late...
Well, don't tell the cave divers it's called Death Valley. They're going straight in.
19th and early 20th century, it was home to miners working in the nearby silver, lead, and zinc mines. So, of course, it included several saloons. Saloons that would feed and water the miners when they came down from trying to find their fortune. Now, whether you were in a big city like San Francisco or a small mining town like Cerro Gordo, when you walked into a saloon, you could expect a drink and you could almost always expect some food.
Okay, so you live like among less people, but you get free food. I mean, honestly, I'd want to live in the small town. That sounds great.
Now, what that food was really ran the gamut. They had like fancy French cuisine with French chefs in a lot of these places, even in small towns. But then some saloons had, you know, pickled eggs and pretzels.
Okay, I'm rocking with the pretzels, but pickled eggs? Dude, and the worst thing too, this just reminded me of pickles. This has nothing to do with eggs. But what happened is, in Texas at the movie theaters, you can get a giant freaking pickle. And then you just sit next to the person shoving a pickle down their throat, and it's so loud and so smelly. It's like the most disruptive snack of all time.
Just like you would find in many bars today. But George Ade, when he was writing in, I believe, the 1930s, he was writing about the saloons that he remembered when he was young. And he said, right in the center of the soiled table cover, you might have found a bowl of baked beans.
Oh, community beans! You want a bite?
And alongside of it, a glass of troubled water. And in the glass were immersed several forks, which, the evidence indicated, had been used in hoisting beans.
I thought it said in the glass were immersed several folks. Like they were just like straight up like lapping it up right next to each other. Like a community trough.
So the baked beans I'm making, the troubled water with utensils in it, which is basically dirty water that people have been using the utensils over and over. I'm not doing that because that's gross. Now I found lots and lots of recipes for baked beans, but since saloons were making these foods for profit, I figured I would use the recipe from Cooking for Profit, which was produced with the restaurants and saloons of the Old West in mind.
So this is like Ye Old Cisco. They all had the same system.
It was originally published in the San Francisco Hotel Gazette in 1886 and says baked pork and beans. Wash and pick over a large heaping cupful of navy beans and steep them in water overnight. Put them on next morning with fresh water to more than cover and baking soda the size of a bean and let boil about an hour. Then carry them to the sink, pour all in a colander, letting the water run away, and put back into the saucepan with cold water enough to come up to a level. Boil again, and in a few minutes they will be soft. Season with a little salt and a tablespoon of molasses.
Wait, you're telling me that dog does all this? Damn, that is a talented dog.
Put them into 4-pint bowls or tin pans, lay an ounce of salt pork on each, and bake half an hour. Very simple. I actually found some even simpler recipes that are literally just pork and beans. Nothing else, no molasses or even salt. Then I found some really complicated ones that have cayenne and onion and lots of other seasonings. So
did they have a lot of seasonings back in cowboy days? Like I don't know, anything before like 1900 I think is probably just very boring and like not seasoned at all. Like where's the Tony Sancheries? Where's the KFC 11 spices and herbs or whatever? Oh, they had salt. Okay, to be fair, salt can elevate a lot of a meal.
If you want to add more seasoning, by all means do so, but for me, I'm following the recipe and starting with 1 1/4 cup of navy beans, 4 ounces of salt pork, scored and then cut into 4 slices, a pinch of baking soda, a teaspoon of salt, and 1 tablespoon of molasses. So first, take the beans and cover them with water and let them sit overnight. You can also rinse your pork at this time if you're using salt pork, which can be hard to find, so you can also use bacon, which you don't need to rinse, but if you're using salt pork, you want to rinse it a couple times. Put it in water, let it sit for about an hour, then dump it out, add more water, let it sit because it is really, really salty.
Dude, any recipe that takes more than like 20 minutes of prep, I'm not gonna do. That's why when I go out to eat, I always order something that's so complicated, I would never make it at home.
Now once the beans are soaked, there shouldn't be any water left. They should have soaked up pretty much all of the water. If there is any water, dump it out. Otherwise, put them into a pot and sprinkle with the baking soda and add fresh water, just enough to cover them, plus about a 1/2 inch. Now here we have a decision to make because every other recipe that I found for pork and beans has you add the pork at this point. But this recipe doesn't have you add the pork until it's baking. The problem with that is the pork will not be cooked, and it needs to be cooked.
It should always be cooked. I'm this way about everything, though. Like, I want everything cooked all the way and hot other than steak.
So, I'm guessing the recipe author just skipped that step or missed that step or has the pork cooked elsewhere, like on a skillet. I don't know.
Dude, how can he be talking about all this pork in front of Tepik? He's going crazy back there. This has to be like, I don't know, torture.
But I'm going to go ahead and add mine now because it is going to also add some much needed flavor. So add it to the beans and let the pot come to a boil and then set the lid on and let the beans cook for 1 hour.
Look at how good he is at stirring the pot. He needs a Twitter account.
And every once in a while, lift the lid and try to skim off any of the scum.
Scum.
Pretty much leave it for an hour. At that point, strain the water out of the beans, then add some cold water just enough to be level with the beans.
It's like
and
shock.
Bring it to a boil until they're nice and soft. This should take about 10 minutes.
Dude, that was the hardest part about getting my wisdom teeth out, was only eating soft food. I love soup. Soup was one of my favorite meals. I would eat soup all the time. Do not get me around like, I don't know, a broccoli cheddar soup. Those are so good. But the problem is that if all you do is eat soup, eventually you're gonna get souped out. Look, I've already said soup so many times in this sentence that it sounds weird. Soup, 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 soup. I did also eat ice cream. I love the Bluebell homemade vanilla. I was tearing that shit up, I'm gonna be honest.
Then remove the pork and add the salt and molasses and stir them into the beans to coat them. Now this recipe has you putting it into 4 different dishes because it's meant to be served to, different people like at a restaurant. But at a saloon, it would have often just been on the free lunch table, one big old pot.
Is this why people got so sick back in the day? Can you imagine going to get some beans from the community bean pot and some mother suckers are
So I'm just putting them into one big tin dish. So once the beans are in the dish, set the pork on top and place the whole thing in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 175 Celsius for a half hour. Now saloons in the Old West, especially in a small town like Cerro Gordo, were so much more than just a watering hole. As the first building that often went up, a saloon might also act as the courtroom, a barber shop, the town hall.
Barber shop? I'm gonna have pubes in my beans? This is so unsanitary. This shit's disgusting. No.
The undertaker's parlor, or even a church should a pastor come through. But on the daily, it was for food and drink. So other than baked beans...
What do you mean pubes? Okay, I see a lot of people are confused. I don't mean like manscaping, like I mean like your face, right? Like if you have like a mustache, like you still gotta like take that off. Like that's pubes. Like you still getting a pubial stew.
What might you expect to get when walking into an Old West saloon?
History!
So the exact definition of a saloon is kind of up for debate. One definition is any place that serves food and drink but makes most of their money through the drink. Historically, that definition doesn't always work, but for our purposes, it works. Now, as towns grew up around the American West, the saloon was often the first building to go up. At first, it was usually...
Dude, you see that? They're like, get the grocery store out of here. We don't care about them fruits and veggie bullshit. Give us our beer, brother.
Nothing more than a tent with a few tables and chairs, a place to wet your whistle. And it was only after the town began to establish itself that they would build a more permanent structure with wooden floors, a polished bar, and of course, bat-wing doors. And yes, those swinging saloon doors were real. It's not just a thing from the movies, at least after the 1870s, once the hinge that lets it do that.
Sorry, I'm going like, this is making me laugh. Bring it in, bring it in.
That was invented. Many saloons had those bat-wing doors. They were called bat-wings because they look like bat wings. But behind those bat-wing doors, they would have normal doors that could be closed in case it's cold or whatever. One of the reasons for those bat-wing doors was to let the smoke out, people were always smoking, and to let fresh, cool air in, kind of create a breeze if you open.
Oh, yeah. Dude, there were probably so many people with like, I guess, did they have cigarettes or like, what are they smoking? Maybe like a pipe or something? Or, I don't know, recreational drugs? Yeah, like a pipe. Oh, and then they also probably had like the swirly mustache. So everybody was just aura farming. Dude, I have actually another question since we're looking at this. Like, what happened to like whimsical men's fashion? Like just walking around with a cool top hat, awesome facial hair, cool jackets, some boots. Like, we need to bring back whimsy to the male fashion industry.
Opened up a window, but also it was at the height that if children were passing by, they couldn't look in and see all the drinking and gambling going on. And there was always drinking and gambling going on.
True!
As far as gambling goes, the most popular games were poker and faro. Faro isn't really played much today, but in the 19th century it was often played more than poker because more people could play at once, the odds were better than most games of chance, and it had very simple rules.
Oh, so it's kind of like craps. Like, I think if you go to a casino, I'm not a crazy gambler, okay? Just sometimes I like to pull like the bar and go, max win, max win, max win. But apparently you're supposed to play craps because it has the best odds versus the house. Or you could also play blackjack. I like blackjack. I think blackjack's fun.
And it was easy to follow along, which is always a benefit if you have been drinking heavily, and many people were, at least in a decent saloon, drinking heavily.
She's a liar, Chad. She's a huge gambler. No, I mean, I like Uma Musume. Does that make me a gambler? Well, yeah, probably, yeah.
So what exactly were they drinking? Well, one of the most popular drinks, at least when it came to spirits, was whiskey. There were two types of whiskey usually available. The good stuff and the less than good stuff.
Oh, like the well?
The good stuff was usually the stuff that was bottled back east or else in other countries, like Old Forester bourbon or Dewar's Scotch, and it...
Dude, and I'm not an alcoholic, but... Okay, this video has a lot of I'm not a but. I'm not an alcoholic, but what was crazy to me was when I was living in Japan, the bottle of like Jack Daniels there was cheaper than it was in the US because of like the liquor laws they have in Japan, which is insane because if it's brewed in the US, like why is it more expensive? It's insane.
Usually came with a labeled bottle. The not so great stuff was usually produced and bottled out back, and usually...
Oh! I'm gonna be honest, I don't want anything bottled out back. I don't know what you're doing. That could be 90% piss.
It didn't have an actual name. People would give it wonderful names, though, like coffin varnish, cactus juice, sheep dip, tarantula juice, firewater, rot gut, or any number of colorful appellations. These were usually locally distilled neutral grain spirits that were flavored with coffee, chilies, or tobacco and spiked with ingredients like strychnine, turpentine, or sulfuric acid.
Turpentine? One time I was painting a picture and I didn't have my room aerated and I was just like smelling and then I thought I died.
To give it some kick. Basically, if it was the taste you were after, then you get the good stuff and you paid for the privilege. But if it was just the effect that mattered, then take the rot gut and you'll get the same effect, if not better, at half the price. Now, if neither of those drinks tickled your fancy, then most saloons would offer beer and champagne. Yes, champagne. Champagne was...
That's kind of classy. Your buddy's drinking some beer and you're just like swirling around your little glass, you're bubbly. Oh, that'd be me. I'd be a champagne lady.
Was actually far more common in the Old West than you might think today. Even here in Cerro Gordo, lots of champagne bottles were found.
Cool.
And one reason was because you could water down whiskey or beer or pretty much whatever. But when you heard a champagne bottle pop, you knew it was champagne.
That's why if you ever go to like a casino where they give you free drinks or like an all-inclusive resort or something, I'll always get like a glass of wine because they can't mess with that. I am not an alcoholic, by the way. I feel like I have to keep saying that, but that is alcoholic advice.
Now, one thing I find really interesting about the whiskey and the other hard liquors is today, the bartender pours you the drink. You're at their mercy of how...
That was my job, by the way. Everyone always say, you always talk about your job. I was a bartender, not a good one, but I was a bartender.
how much you get. But back in the Old West, that wasn't always the case. It was customary to belly up, nominate your pizen, drink fast, and make room for the next comer. The barkeep didn't put the liquor into glasses. If you asked for scotch or what have you, he'd grab the bottle in his right hand, a glass in his left, cross hands, and plunk the two down before you. You took a small or a big drink as you wished. For 10 cents, the tariff didn't vary. So I think it really depends on who the man behind the bar was, because many bartenders, especially if they owned the saloon, had a reputation for being sort of miserly. In reviewing a rich and variegated personal experience of saloons, the feature that stands out most prominently in my recollection is the hard, listless, unfeeling type of man who keeps saloons.
He's just like stoic maxing. He was going for aura, trying to look cool.
The bon ami, the good fellowship supposed by some to prevail among saloon habitués, is totally lacking in saloon keepers. I never knew a saloon keeper who was a really good fellow. Though according to Mark Twain, the cheapest and easiest way to become an influential man and be looked up to by the community at large was to stand behind a bar, wear a cluster diamond pin, and sell whiskey. Now there were bartenders.
So this can get a little political because they establish the saloon first, and if you're the guy who owns the place, then basically you own 900 little businesses too because they all operate out of the saloon. So you're kind of like, I don't know, a pyramid scheme business maxer. You could get a lot of influence very quickly.
Called mixologists who were loved by their community and true bon vivants. And those bartenders typically made cocktails. Now, not every saloon served cocktails, but cocktails were a lot more popular in the Old West than you might think.
I wouldn't have
thought that. They were usually made with whiskey, gin, or brandy, and had names like cobblers, smashes, juleps.
I was making smashes and juleps. They were probably using the funny little copper cups too, and maybe like we had one called the bee's knees.
Flips and crustas. They typically weren't as complicated as the cocktails of today, but they were a great way to temper the flavor of poor liquor.
Yeah.
They could also be an excellent tonic because very often they included bitters, which were seen as medicinal.
Yeah.
And supposedly they were. Though you should take the temperature of the room when ordering a cocktail, because if you're in a place like Seattle or San Francisco back...
I always forget that cities did exist back then. Like, I thought it was all gonna be like if you lived in the Wild West or you lived in like Joe Texasburg, you probably enjoy drinking.
In the day, order a cocktail by all means. But if you're in a little town like Cerro Gordo and you order a hot gin fizz or a warm toddy, you might be considered to have an educated thirst.
Ooh!
That was not a compliment. Just stick to the whiskey neat.
They probably thought you were just kind of like an a-hole then if you're ordering like crazy shit. I don't know. I feel like that kind of happens sometimes too, like depending on where you go. Like you don't go into like a sports bar and ask for something crazy, like you just kind of get what's on tap.
Now as different saloons offered different drinks, they also offered different foods because just like bars and restaurants today, they ran the gamut. There were those saloons that were a single room with a handful of tables, a few spittoons, sawdust-covered floors, and a tinny piano in the corner. And then there were those that were multi-story buildings decorated with velvet curtains, crystal chandeliers, silver-framed mirrors behind the bar, and can-can dancers entertaining the men every night.
There's ladies dancing and kicking their legs everywhere? Holy shit! This is where you wanna be!
For instance, at the Occidental Saloon in Tombstone, Arizona, for Sunday dinner, they offered things like chicken giblet soup, salmon, leg of lamb with oysters, an assortment of cold meats, boiled meats, roast meat like suckling pig or pork with applesauce, fashionable dishes like cream fricassee of chicken and lapine domestique with desserts of custard and fruit pies and plum pudding.
Okay, so I'm starting to see that like French cuisine was very popular back in the day. What kind of happened to that? There's not really a lot of French places where I live. And I don't know if I've ever had French food. I don't know. Why no more France? I mean, Expedition 33 was great.
French cuisine had become all the rage.
Oh! Sorry, I not pre-watched. I don't know how I summoned that. He's just very good at scripting. It just happened that way.
In America at the time, and that included the Old West. Even over in Death Valley, which I think is that way, there was a French restaurant in the 1800s.
Damn.
Which is just crazy. There's no French restaurant there
Oh, the Louisiana Purchase! Right? Is that why?
now. But for every one of these fancy saloons, there were probably half a dozen that were more middle of the road. They offered merchant lunches, which typically cost 10 or 15 cents and included a beer along with a little stew or baked beans or roast beef or mashed potatoes and gravy. Then there was the free lunch, which was a staple of saloon culture throughout the country in the late 19th century.
But now this is like stripper culture? Okay, that sounded wild. But I think they do like buffets and stuff at strip clubs. So it just like transferred to the strip clubs instead of like saloons.
It wasn't exactly free. Essentially what you did was you went into the saloon and you bought a drink. For the price of that one drink, you got full access to a lunch table.
Nice.
And usually the food that you got to eat was worth far more than the price of that drink.
Yeah.
So it was incumbent on the bartender to make sure you kept drinking so they could make their money back. The cheapest places for men are supposed to be the so-called free lunches, though this is probably a mistake. For these free lunches are attached to bars, and it is expected that their guests shall patronize the bar sufficiently to pay all favors they get in the way of free food.
Don't try
San
me,
Francisco
I love the Rob.
saloons were especially famous for their free lunches. In 1891, Rudyard Kipling, who wrote The Jungle Book, came through San Francisco and went into a saloon, in which men with hats on the back of their heads were wolfing food from a counter. It was the institution of the free lunch I had struck. You paid for a drink and got as much as you wanted to eat. For something less than a rupee a day, a man can feed himself sumptuously in San Francisco, even though he be a bankrupt.
Do you think the food was actually like hitting at the free bar, or was it bad? Maybe it was so bad it was good. This was like their Taco Bell.
Remember this, if ever you are stranded in these parts.
I mean, nothing free is bad.
Just because it was free does not mean that it wasn't still quality food.
How did he answer my question? What is happening? He's reading my mind.
Food. One meal included a monster silver boiler filled with a most excellent oyster soup, a round of beef that must have weighed at least 40 pounds, vessels filled with potatoes, stewed mutton, stewed tomatoes, and macaroni à la française.
Ooh, I love macaroni.
All that for the cost of a 15-cent drink, which even with inflation would be like $4.25, basically for all you can eat, and you get a drink. The thing is, especially in the larger cities where there was a lot of competition, the different saloons began upping the quality and the quantity of their food to outdo each other.
Guys, this is what we need in the games industry, okay? Can we get some good AAA games so they start competing with each other again? All I play are indie games now. Please learn from this video.
And eventually they made it so nobody could drink enough to outweigh the cost of these free lunches, so all the saloons started losing money. As far back as November of 1854, the saloon owners of San Francisco got together to put a stop to these free lunches. But after 2 meetings, they realized that even if just a few saloons held out and kept offering them, then they would get all the patrons. So free lunches are still on tap for the freeloaders.
They're calling me a lazy bones.
And there were indeed some freeloaders. It was not uncommon for people to just walk into the saloon, walk up to the lunch table, and start eating.
I mean, technically you could do that at like a continental breakfast at a, I don't know, a hotel. Like, they don't know if you're staying there because they switch out the people all the time. You could utilize this strat nowadays.
And should this inexplicable lunch fiend not happen to be called to drink, he devours whatever...
The drink? He's here? Oh my God. Niche reference, I'm sorry.
...he can, and while the bartender is occupied, tries to escape unnoticed. Of course, in smaller towns like Cerro Gordo, the free lunch usually wasn't so opulent, partly because they didn't have as much competition with other saloons. Also, what you got usually depended on who ran the saloon, who was the cook in the back, or who was the owner. Like there were
Oh, they need like a ye old Gordon Ramsay going up in here and like, I don't know, putting his finger down the line of like the buffet, maybe like sniffing, going in the back, looking for rats.
a lot of Chinese saloons that would serve chop suey and chow mein, very popular in the Old West. Lots of German.
Dude, people had so much more of like a distinct, or like, what's the word I'm looking for, wide palate back in the day. I'd just be getting chicken tenders and mac and cheese.
Saloons that had different sausages like bratwurst and sauerkraut on the menu. And then, of course,
like
there
sauerkraut.
were a lot of Mexican saloons because until 1848, California and most of the Southwest was Mexico.
I learned about this.
And so they would have pozole and tamales on the menu.
Oh, I miss tamales, man. There was this lady with this awesome truck I used to go to when I lived in Texas. Oh, they don't have that here. Also, they don't have kolaches here in Florida either.
And most all of the free lunches would have an assortment of things like cheeses and pickles and little cold meats and clams and oysters.
What?
Oysters were incredibly popular in America at the time as a whole, but
Classy.
especially in the Old West among cowboys and miners.
Classy
You don't
kids.
usually watch an Old Western and see people eating oysters, but they did a lot. Sometimes they were fresh oysters. They were coming in on trains and stuff from places like San Francisco. But a lot of times, especially in small...
Dude, San Francisco is like the Civ City. Like, it's like going out, everybody always has a trade route. Like, San Francisco must have been pretty cool.
Or towns that were further away from the trains, you would have canned oysters. Then there was another category of food that was almost always sure to be
Mac and
available
cheese.
at a free lunch. These included sundry pretzels, crackers, bits of cheese and sausage, and a...
Oh, Painter, thank you for the 100 bits. Did Barry just bust? Anyways, guys, I get a homemade burrito or go get shitty Mexican Taco Bell, and if so, should I get the Doritos Loco? This is what you're gonna do. 5-layer burrito, remove the beans, add chipotle sauce, add rice, get it grilled, and add extra nacho cheese, and then you have a quesarito.
salt pickle or a radish, a repast intended to provoke thirst rather than to satisfy hunger. Salty snacks are still common at bars today because they do make you more thirsty. And pretzels and salted peanuts, those are still at many bars, but one thing that didn't really make the leap to today is the sardelle.
What's
limp,
that?
silver-coated minnow.
Oh! Guys, for some reason, I keep getting this Reddit recommended to me. It's called, like, tinned fish. And it's just a bunch of people who post, like, their hauls of tinned fish, and everybody in the comments goes, oh, yeah, that's a good one. I like that.
Relative of the sardine, saturated with brine and probably sold by the hogshead, became one of the staple standbys of every saloon catering to a reliable beer trade. They were saltier than the 7 seas and were served whole. They were in great favor because a patron, after he had taken a couple of them draped across a slab of rye bread, had to rush to the bar and drink a lot of beer to get the taste out of his mouth. The sardellen were more than fish. They were silent partners.
Their sacrifice gave them a boost in revenue. Thank you, little fishies. We appreciate you.
So now that we know what they drank and what they ate at an Old West saloon, my question is, how did they eat it? What did they look like when they were eating?
Maybe like they pick it up and go, ah.
Because these were often communities where men outnumbered women 20, 30, 40 to 1.
What? There were that many men running around? Oh my God. Whoa. I'd be like the only girl there. It's like the Dark Souls Reddit all over again.
If not more.
Fully ratioed.
So table manners, I'm thinking, weren't so great.
Just like Chad. Hey, we got, I think now it's at 8% women now, okay? We got 8% women on the YouTube channel. Stonks going up, okay?
And luckily, there was a rather prudish Englishman who went into a saloon in Ogden, Utah in the 1880s and wrote about it. I saw a performance that filled me with astonishment and dismay. It was a man eating his dinner.
I'm sorry, I just imagine him eating his dinner and the dude just like, What? I haven't been putting it in that hole the whole time.
Let me here remark, with all possible courtesy, that the American on his travels is the most reprehensible eater I have ever seen. He never apparently chews his food, but dabs and pecks at the dishes one after the other with the rapidity, which merely as a juggling trick might be performed in London to crowded houses every day. Every now and then he shuts his eyes and strains his throat. This, I suppose, is when he swallows.
Wait, so Americans the entire time in all of history have been known as big backs? Is this our legacy?
For I have seen children getting rid of cake with the same sort of spasm.
Damn!
What I love is that next he includes a list of what the man is eating. The mixture of his food, if it pleases him, does not annoy me.
Okay, is this gonna be like a Nikocado avocado mukbang or whatever moment?
For if a man likes to eat mouthfuls of huckleberries, bacon, apple pie, pickled mackerel, peas, mutton, gherkins, oysters, radishes, tomatoes, custard, and poached eggs, this is a bona fide meal copied from my notebook on the spot. In discriminate confusion, it has nothing to do with me. He says that this entire meal lasted all but 5 minutes. Then he grabbed a handful of toothpicks and leans idly against the doorpost, as if time were without limit or end. The whole thing is a mystery to me.
Dude, seeing everybody dressed up right here too. I used to work at a steakhouse in Texas, and I remember this family sat down, and it was during the time of the rodeo. So I walked up to them, I'm like, hi, I'm blah, 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 I'm gonna be your waiter, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, oh, I like your outfits, because they were wearing like cowboy hats and like cowboy outfits. I was like, you guys just got back from the rodeo? And the guy looked at me and he goes, no. We always dress like this. And he meant that. I gave that table away so fast, I was like, yeah, I'm not getting a tip. It's over, I'm cooked.
So to honor the rugged pioneers of the American West, I feel that I should drop all semblance of civility as I eat my pork and beans, which should be about ready. And here we are, baked pork and beans from a Wild West Saloon.
I kind of just want this on top of like rice or mashed potatoes though. I think it's missing like one thing. Did they have deodorant back then? Imagine the smell. I don't have to imagine. I'll just go to like, I don't know, Anime Expo. Probably the same experience.
Bon appetit. I love baked beans.
Me too.
Really good. They could be a little softer, I will say that, but they're not like too firm. I just like I like a softer bean. But the flavor is outstanding. It's actually so much better than what you get in a can. Even though there's like nothing to it. There's no onion, there's no spice or anything. It's just that molasses and the salt pork. That salt pork, I think, really adds a lot of flavor. Now,
and I mean, like, sometimes simple's better. Like, there's been so many meals I've had that were just like a bunch of simple ingredients, but it tasted more fresh because it wasn't like a shit ton of, I don't know, like corn syrup and stuff. And to be fair, this does look a little dry. You might be right.
I'm not a huge one to like just eat the pork from pork and beans.
Like a chip.
It's usually just really fatty, as is this, but I'm gonna take a bite just to see.
Give it a little nibble.
It's really fatty.
I actually love fatty meat. I will always pick a ribeye if I have to go and get a steak somewhere.
It's really good. Yeah, these are really good. I'm gonna be eating these tonight while I'm here. Mighty fine. So as always, I will get this recipe up on the Tasting History website, tastinghistory.com, which I made with help from today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace makes building a website so easy with their dynamic tools like their drag and drop technology.
Dude, the way he was grabbing that text made me so scared because it reminded me of making PowerPoints, and as soon as you moved an image, the entire thing exploded.
Technology for both desktop and mobile. And they have lots of templates which give you a wonderful base to start with, and then you can customize it however you want. And when you make a change on the desktop version, it automatically makes it on the mobile version. And if you use your website for business, Squarespace lets you create email campaigns to keep in contact with your customers so they are always apprised of new items or when there is a sale. So if you're looking to start a website, go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/tastinghistory.
I'm gonna make a website where you guys all get a crayon and then you draw like, I don't know, something on the website, and it's a giant canvas, and then at the end of the year I print it out and I put it on my wall.
To get 10% off of your first purchase of a website or domain.
No Pinot, please.
And I want to thank again Brent for letting me film in his amazing town. Definitely go check out his fantastic channel, Ghost Town Living.
Cool.
And I will see you next time here again, I believe, on Tasting History.
Yay! clappy, clappy, clappy for the video. I love that. That was awesome. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new here, remember to subscribe. Please check out the original and come by twitch.tv/BerryCrepe. Or if you would like to use code Berry for 10% off your gamer subs order, it helps me out. One day I really want to get a booba cup, so that would be awesome. I hope you have a great evening. Goodbye, YouTube. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.